Remain seated, please. Permanecer sentados, por favor.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome.
Our largest single-theme land expansion ever.
Now we want you to share with us our latest and greatest dream.
Matterhorn Matt presents Matterhorn Mondays.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 129 of Matterhorn Mondays, coming to you live from the Outpost. I'm your host, Matterhorn Matt.
And I'm your co-host, Jeremy.
And today, that's kind of weird to hear, but yeah, Alex is
hate saying it. It makes
Alex
me very
is
sad.
still MIA. Hopefully he will be returning soon. Not sure, but yeah. For now, we're stuck with Jeremy. Ugh.
No. I'm stuck with myself, too, if it's any consolation.
No, the worst part is that you're stuck with Matt.
Oh, it's
I
true.
wasn't going to say it out loud, but thank you for articulating it for me.
Where's my bruh sound effect?
Bruh.
We're in for a great episode, you guys. Like I said, Mr. T. Will, returning guest, is joining us once again. And I guess for all these newcomers, why don't you go ahead and give off, sort of read off your qualifications of what makes you qualified to be on this prestigious podcast. There you have it. Very nice. There are his credentials,
Nice.
everybody. For those of you who were wondering, yeah, we've had T-Will on the episode on the show a few episodes ago. Glad to have him back. And yeah, like he mentioned, link to the Discord server as well as our Twitters, Instagrams, all that jazz. You guys know the deal. Will be down in the description below. And if you'd like to be wished a happy birthday live on the stream, you can do so by submitting your name down in the Google Docs and sort of write in your day, write in the year. I guess you don't have to do the year. Your name and the day. And this week we have 3 birthdays, you guys. Chris, I'm going to pronounce this last name wrong. I apologize. Chris Metzger on Monday the 30th, as well as Gregory's birthday on Monday the 30th, and on April 2nd, Ashley's birthday. So happy birthday to all 3 of you lovely viewers. And you guys know the drill. If you'd like to voice your opinion on any of the topics we have at hand, go ahead and ring up 575-386-5814. We'll be listening to the voicemails live throughout the episode, you guys. Please, we have a lot of great topics that we're excited to get into, and we'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on everything. But
Yes, it's the best way to answer. I mean, it's the best way for us to actually answer any of your questions on air. We don't always clock all of the comments in the chat. And also, we're down one regular caller today because he happens to be on the show with us.
Oh, yeah.
So please, pick up the phone, would you please? I'm begging you.
I don't know if I've seen Avery in the chat, so
I
we
know,
might be
I'm
down
a little nervous.
Might be down our leader here. So, guys,
I know.
step up for Avery.
Someone's got to pick. What are you so afraid of? Pick up the phone, people. Ask questions.
There's no such thing as a bad opinion or a bad discussion topic.
Exactly.
So give it a call.
I so agree.
is very
I
true.
love, as you know, with my tenure with Alex, I love it when people disagree. So please pick up the phone.
Again, 575-386-5814. Excited to hear what you guys have to say. But before we get into any of our topics, it's time for everybody's favorite segment, Matt Snaps.
A whole wide world of knowledge awaits underneath the cap. It's once again time this week for Matterhorn Matt Snaps.
Matt Snaps, you guys. Today we are blessed, you guys. Peach Tea Snapple, the classic, the original. I'm just going to go ahead and go right into it. Open it. Don't spill it. I'll try not to spill it like last episode, you guys. That was a quality snap, I'll tell you that. A polar bear cannot be seen by an infrared camera due to its transparent fur. That's pretty cool, you guys. I mean, you can see the fur, though, so it's not transparent. Whatever. Anyways, that's been Matt Snaps, everybody. Just tell Alex to get a magnifying glass so he can turn his small business into a large one. There it is. There it is, everybody. Joke of the episode. But yeah, now it's time for everybody's second favorite segment, News from the Peak.
We now present to you News from the Peak.
A lot of great pieces of news to discuss today, you guys. First bit, Call of the Wild and Downhill. Recent motion pictures by Walt Disney Studios release early on digital, and both will be available for purchase starting March 27th, which I believe was Friday, the last Friday, yeah. So this is again following the trend that we've seen Disney, and not just Disney, but a lot of other studios this past month release their new films out on digital. Since people can't go to the movie theaters anymore nowadays, why not just release them for people to buy, watch at home, rent at Redbox or whatever. Mr. Tiwa, what are your thoughts here on Call of the Wild and Downhill being released early?
It's not surprising, and also this could be this could lead to an exponential. It could lead to an exponential death of the movie theater experience, because companies will see that companies will consider moving just to streaming as a more financially viable option. The movie, and if it does happen, it will be a sad death for the movie theater, because it is an experience. It is something grand and spectacular. I mean, movies like the Ten Commandments, movies like Jaws, movies, and Fight Club, all these great movies were made for the big screen, to wrap around you in this room of sight and sound. So seeing that go will be a travesty for the filmmaking art form.
Yeah, I have the opposite opinion of movie theaters. I'm not a big fan.
Can't believe you, man.
Jeremy, what about you?
I hope it doesn't. I mean, we talked about this last week, but it makes sense for this global crisis that we're going through to, if, these studios are like, well, we have to make some money back. So I think, it's smart to release these movies on digital services so they can make some money back. I hope it doesn't. Listen, the movie theater has been challenged before with the advent of television. People thought that was going to be the death of going to the movies. This is a little bit different. This is kind of level 2. Because, now it's, you can make a movie and just release it to a streaming service. And it's a little different than like direct to video, because that kind of had I don't want to say stigma, but it kind of meant your movie wasn't as good.
Yeah.
So that didn't really, VHS, DVD, that didn't really destroy movie theater. But now it's perfectly normal to take in content that is direct to streaming and consider it to be just as quality as a movie that gets released in theaters. And just proof of that example is what happened with one of our great directors, Martin Scorsese. The Irishman basically was a direct-to-streaming release. And, of course, he fought to make sure that there was some special way to be able to view the film in the theaters for a period of time. But it was basically a high-level film, high-level filmmaker in terms of quality, direct to streaming, and of course Oscar nominations. So it's a whole new world. I just spoke the first lyrics of the Matt Snaps song, and I was about to. Now that song is in my head. Oh my God,
it's a catchy tune. Tune.
It is, or it's a whole wide world of knowledge. Sorry. That's underneath the cap. Okay, I can't believe that's in my head.
Knows the lyrics.
It's so horrible. So it is kind of a whole new world in terms of film making and what mediums are available to make it for. But I really, really think that the movie theater experience will survive, because even at a certain point, people will want to go to the movies. And I actually think when we come out on the other side of this thing, which we will, by the way, may not be for a while, but we will come out on the other side of this, I think people are going to value the types of social experiences that we've took for granted forever. So I think people are going to value the little things like going to the movie theater and taking in a movie with other people around you. I'm shocked and surprised and a little disappointed that you're not in support of the movie theaters, Matt. But
I think the reason for that is not so much the experience itself, but the lack of care by the movie theater chains themselves. So if you go to, let's name drop, if you go to an AMC, you're not exactly getting a good experience.
Right.
Drop popcorn, crying babies in an R-rated movie, that type of stuff happens constantly. So the experience becomes diminished, even though the core of it is, even though the core experience of a movie theater is valuable.
Mm-hmm. True. All of that is true. And not enough for me to wish that the movie theater experience was going away. And that's very true. But hopefully, because maybe we'll start to value the movie theater experience, because we're going to miss it for a few months, or maybe even a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think maybe people will there'll be a higher demand for a better theatrical movie-going experience. And hopefully, because of what's going to happen with the economy, things will have to be, the market will be forced to be more affordable. But I don't trust the market to do that. I'm also not someone who believes the market solves all the problems in the world, so I don't even know why I said that. So yeah, I mean, who knows? I don't think movie theaters are going to die, just because I think it's one of those things that we're going to want to experience after all of this is done.
All right. Well, great.
It all depends on it depends on what we do as consumers, and the market will respond to that. That's all that can be.
Yeah. Well, consumer behavior and what we do depends on our, it's not just, demand is you have to take into consideration human emotion and circumstances. And I think a social experience like that, I do think consumers will respond positively to that, but we'll see. I'm trying to be optimistic. So, and that's true. That's true. In the Great Depression, movie theaters were popular.
Well, let's see.
So, but yeah.
We will most definitely see. I mean, I don't hate movie theaters, but anyways, moving on to, I just had to clarify that. I don't hate them.
All right.
But moving on to our second bit here of news from the peak. This is a very interesting. Disney raises $1.3 billion in new debt in Canada. So I'm not the best when it comes to this money business stuff. So, Mr. Jeremy, what are your thoughts here on this topic? Disney raises $1.3 billion in debt in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're... Disney's losing money. Think about how much they depend on these types of social experiences, not just going to a theme park, but going to a movie theater. They're literally in the business of bringing people together physically to take something in. So it's kind of like, luckily they have this streaming platform, which can kind of hopefully save them a little bit. But they're losing a lot of money, and they're going to take on a lot of debt, and I will see how this impacts the future of the company for this, still beginning part of the century, and particularly this decade. So yeah, that's really all I have to say about that for now.
It's because we have getting a little bit of social, I mean, I guess sociological here, because we live in a post-industrial world here in the
Mm-hmm.
West, especially. It's one of those, having a pandemic like this that we have not seen for actually 100 years, since the
Mm-hmm.
Spanish flu pandemic that hit the Great War in Europe. Uh, so something like this is going to, so seeing how we respond to this is brand new territory. We can look to the past for some things, but how we forge forward can be much more. And media companies, media conglomerates like Disney, Viacom, uh, and and they're all, everybody's taking a hit because of how everybody, because everything's closed, everything, there's no productivity, and so how we forge forward within the next few months is going to drastically change society in a lot of ways. So Disney will make it out of there. It's just, what is the damage, and hopefully it's not too bad. It all depends.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, links to all these articles we refer to will be down in the description below. And for our final bit of news from the peak here, not really news, but I found this video. I saw it on Twitter, on the internet, on Instagram this past week. This is a video of what Disneyland currently looks like without any guests in it. And I thought it would be nice if I could find the right desktop here. Hold on. Oh gosh. I messed up all my setting. Here we go. Alright, so this is what an empty Disneyland looks like, and I just want to put this into perspective, you guys. Disneyland has been closed. When did it, I can't remember the exact date. It was earlier in the month, I believe.
Yeah, like
Mid-March.
the beginning. Yeah, at the end of the. Let me look at my calendar. Yeah, it was like the beginning of the second week of March. Yeah.
Disneyland has been closed, you guys. And look, just look, it's so sad to me to see no one in there when it shouldn't. I don't know. It's weird to me.
This is Walt's nightmare.
Mhm.
I think he said constantly that he had nightmares of an empty Disneyland. So him
Right.
seeing this
Yeah.
would be, it would probably be necessary, but it would break his heart. It would absolutely break his heart seeing his pride and joy in Anaheim being not entertained.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the upside, however, I mean, everyone is itching to get back into the park, so it's sort of half of his nightmare, because I think his main nightmare was that people just wouldn't care and not go,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Listen, these parks are going to be filled at the end of this. I'm not worried about it. I mean, it has to be done. If the parks remained open, it would be we'd be at Italy levels right now, which is horrifying. So this is all necessary. Yeah, it's a time of adversity, but yeah, I mean, it's a good thing. I mean, it's one of the upsides of the information age that we're even able to put on this show, at the kind of professional level that we put it on like this. I mean, it's incredible how we're still able to still have this show be on the air and still have the same dedicated viewers and still have these conversations and still connect with people. I mean, we're really living in that Act 3 of the 94 version of Spaceship Earth. We're really actually experiencing. I don't think anyone's really experienced the, on that descent, you saw everyone connecting via video chat, and you're like, wow, that's going to be in the future. But you see how everyone's really connecting emotionally, and I think this is the first time where we're actually using that technology as that attraction predicted we would be using that technology. So that's kind of, that's an optimistic thing of this moment is we're becoming more responsible with the technology we have in the information age in terms of communication.
It's a shock to the system that ultimately, I think, will create a beneficial thing. It will create, because a lot of society will change, and I hopefully, I think this will lead to people maybe taking a little bit more responsibility for things, maybe being more communal in many aspects. The future is uncertain, but I think wallowing in the fear of uncertainty will ultimately breed nothing but misery. So like the old saying goes, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And getting past this and moving on and developing new things to make life better, I think is ultimately our end goal. I think it's ultimately something that we are going to achieve, because this will pass. This is next happen. Lives will be lost, unfortunately, but hopefully the lessons that we learn from this will make us a lot better.
I agree. There's the medical correspondent for the CBS News, Dr. John LaPook, has said something I think really, really well. I'm going to pass it on. He says there's going to be a beginning, a middle, and an end, and I think that's kind of an optimistic thing. We are going to get out of this. So. Yes.
Yeah. So, again, very sad, but yeah, like it's necessary for the parks to be closed. Hopefully, in the future we'll come back to a replenished, refreshed version of Disneyland, but we'll see. We will see. But that does it for this week's news from the Peak. And guys, no Alex in the parks this week. I'm devastated, you guys, that we don't have an update from Alex inside of Disneyland this week. I mean, we will press on, I guess. That's what Alex would want us to do. But anyways, we got a lot of great main topics here today. First topic, I want to discuss SeaWorld letting go more than 90% of its employees this past week. Very excited to talk about that. Second topic, Disneyland and Walt Disney World Resort are set to remain closed until further notice, bypassing that end of the month sort of opening date that they announced. And finally, we're going to try something new here. Thanks to Mr. T-Will, he brought up a topic. We're going to do an attraction retrospective on space. Or I guess I was going to not read off the name of the the ride, but oops. If you guys don't know,
oh god,
it's not a Matterhorn Mondays without a bruh.
Without a bruh. That's true. Wait, let me find the button. Bruh. There it is. All right, yeah,
it's okay.
I guess
it could still be a couple of options. So we'll see which one it's going to be when he actually announces the name of the attraction.
Yeah, because I didn't say the whole thing, you guys.
He didn't.
I could be messing with you, but anyways, for our first,
he could be.
For our first main topic here today, SeaWorld, like I mentioned, is letting go more than 90% of its employees. Thousands of employees are getting let go at SeaWorld, and they won't be getting paid after March 31st. Now, crazy thought that this is actually happening. SeaWorld sent a letter to employees on Friday that stated, quote, "Government orders prohibiting large gatherings, restricting travel, and mandating business closures have caused many companies to scale back or cease operations. They have caused significant disruption to our communities and are anticipated to do so for the foreseeable future." Now, like I said, crazy stuff. Jeremy, what are your thoughts here on SeaWorld letting go more than 90% of its employees?
I mean, that's just devastating for all of those employees, and it's happening to workers in minimum wage jobs, not even in minimum wage jobs, all over the world, all over the country. I mean, my job's been furloughed. I haven't been fired, thank God. But some people are just losing their jobs, and there's gonna be a lot of economic. The unemployment rate is already skyrocketing, and we'll see how long it's gonna skyrocket after we even get out of this. So it's just, even when the virus is contained and the virus is gone, there's gonna be all of these economic questions that come up after the fact. So, I mean, it's complicated because I don't know. I don't know the insider politics of SeaWorld and how much mony that
Yeah, I
they
mean, who would
have,
want to?
and
Anyways.
I can't. I mean, this is just, we don't normally think this is the first time we talked about SeaWorld on this show, or any, so I don't know, but the only thing I can really comment on is that I feel for those workers. This is a tough time of adversity, and I mean, so many people are claiming unemployment and stuff like that, and it's just, we're all going through it together, and yeah, I mean, I can't really comment on the logistics of it all, but I can emotionally respond to it. So yeah, it's
SeaWorld or
it's sad.
World. Is that a reference from The Office? I think that's anyways. Sorry.
That's okay. Just strike one.
SeaWorld Entertainment has not been the most financially stable. I mean, we're still post Blackfish, the documentary that really tanked the reputation. And with that, I mean, they did manage to bounce back a bit from in 2018 by changing up prices and offering different attractions, mainly roller coasters. And with that, so they're getting better, but it's still not as strong as they were pre-Blackfish. So and the problem is with so many questions of a essentially halted economy at this point, and the questions of pandemics and so forth, every decision that is made is both the right and the wrong decision. So there's nothing, we can say, oh, that's wrong, they shouldn't do that, or why, or look in hindsight and be like, why did they make that decision? That was so stupid. No, but you can't win without losing in this situation, because that's just the ultimate thing. And every decision is going to be painful. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, and
absolutely.
It is also worth noting, the company did state that they will be letting the employees return after the park reopens, whenever that will be, probably sometime within the next, I don't even know. It's hard to predict this kind of stuff, but there's another quote here that I'd like to read. Quote, "The furlough," I think that's how it's pronounced, "period is uncertain at this time due to the temporary park closures and will be reassessed as business conditions dictate. The company looks forward to welcoming back its ambassadors and guests when it is safe to open again." So, crazy. Again, 90% of its employees. I guess SeaWorld doesn't have the funds like Disney does to be able to pay their cast members throughout, the rest of the month into April. So I guess it would make sense. But again, it's just very sad to see, I'm sure. 90% of people are out of their jobs. And it's going to be hard to find another job until this whole pandemic thing blows over. But yeah, unless you guys have any final thoughts on this topic.
No, just if you are someone who's now out of work because of this, it's stay strong. There will be an end. There will be an end. A beginning, middle, and end. So this isn't forever.
All right. Well, moving on to our second topic here, you guys. Disney tweeted out that Disneyland Resort and Walt Disney World Resort will remain closed until further notice, which will be extending the April 1st reopening date that they previously announced. Disney also stated that cast members will be paid through April 18th. Now, I guess we can sort of touch on the fact that Disneyland is closed until the foreseeable future. I mean, I'm sure we all knew that it was going to extend past the end of the month date that they had set. But, just to see the words "closed until further notice," it kind of reminds me of that movie, The National Lampoon's Vacation, where they drive to, Wally World, and it's just closed when they get there. World. Yeah, kind of reminds me of that. Doesn't really apply, really, but anyways, yeah, closed until further notice, you guys. Jeremy, what are your thoughts on, the Magic Kingdom and Walt Disney World being closed until further notice?
It has to be done. I mean, this is, I don't know what to say. It's just, these are the times we live in. It's the right thing to do. We have to stay at home, and we can't, as much as we love these places and stuff, but we don't know how long this is going to last. I mean, I can tell you right now, when this kind of really, when everyone first started to panic maybe a couple weeks ago, when I was sent home from work, they said, we'll be back most likely March 30th. Well, I can tell you I'm not flying back to New York tonight to go to work tomorrow. And it's an indefinite situation for everybody, I think, right now. I'm even highly skeptical of those mid-April predictions.
Yeah.
So I think it actually was very smart, because it's very smart, I think, to say indefinitely at this point, because it's the truth. I mean, the uncertainty is real, and I know this kind of fuels the uncertainty, but we don't have a grasp on when life is going to be able to go back to normal. So, yeah, and I'm worried for those cast members who are going to stop being paid after April 18th. So, but we're all going through it. I know I'm just being redundant at this point, but it's, really you got to zoom out and look at it beyond just the logistics of it all, because it's so much more, and it affects everybody. It affects the three of us. It affects everyone who's watching, and affects everyone who's not watching. It affects the whole world. We've never gone through something like this in our lifetime. And, yeah, I mean, I don't even find it strange that the parks are closed, because it just it feels like the right thing to do.
Yeah.
It makes sense that that's what we're doing. That's what's happening as a response to this. So, yeah.
Mr. T. Will, what are your thoughts?
Again, it's unfortunate decisions. Now, some people have noted that you can pick up reservations at Walt Disney World for June 1st and onwards. Now, don't take that as an indication that, the parks will stay closed until June, or we'll be back up in June, because we don't know. It's now best case scenario will probably be in, it will probably be June, but that's just an observation. That's just a prediction, not concrete. We can only just wait and see. Hopefully, things can get back to normal, and we'll be back in swing for the summer. We don't know.
Yeah, and I'd like to touch on the date that they said there, that they'd be paying their cast members through April 18th. Does that mean they're going to stop paying them after April 18th? Is that what that means?
So it means after April 18th they will no longer be paid. You kind of cut out for me, so I don't know if I'm answering the question that you asked, but
yeah, no, that was
yeah. So they'll be paid from the time they've been furloughed through April 18th. But I've been reading online that it's like, I'm getting kind of a mix, and T. Will, you're a former cast member, so you might have a better grasp of what's going on. But I've read that some people, it depends on if they are scheduled to work that they're getting paid, and some people aren't scheduled, so they're not going to be getting paid through this period. So I'm confused about what the logistics actually are, aside from the formal announcement.
When it comes to, well, I haven't really heard that, but what I imagine could be the thing is that you're scheduled weekly. So when you're working, this week of March, you'll get your itinerary for the week next, and so and then that's when you can do transfers and calls and so forth to make sure of everything. So that's at least one aspect. That's maybe what why I could see happening is some people not getting their schedule, so that means that they won't be working. That's my best guess to hearing that, but I don't necessarily know. I have been hearing that the unions for both Disneyland and Disney World have been making pushes for more cast member pay and so forth. It's again, everything is it's all rock and hard place for everybody. Disney, unions, cast members, families. Were any decision that you make is going to have a negative effect here. And with the continuing closure of the resorts, that this could really negatively impact some things, like the Epcot project could be severely reduced. We could lose something like the Mary Poppins land.
Yeah.
It's true.
Halt production on the Star Wars Hotel. Maybe Mickey Minnie's Runaway Railway will stay in Disney Hollywood Studios, never come to Disneyland.
Shame. Yeah.
Tomorrowland could be another pipe dream. We'll be stuck with this Tomorrowland that we've had since '05. So we have so many questions, and the longer this sits out, the more likely something will heads will roll in terms of projects. Some things will be completely shuttered. Remember back in 2017, I believe, there was the announcement of this Main Street Theater in Magic Kingdom.
Oh, yeah.
They filed patents. They filed permits to start doing it. Then they updated the permit and it's gone. Never talked about again. Never even mentioned.
Yeah.
So this is not. And during 9/11, they were building the second half of Pop Century, and immediately shuttered it. And those buildings just stood there for years until finally we made into Art of Animation. So it's not out of the ordinary for Disney to scale back tremendously on bad times. So it's looking at what's most likely going to be lost. Because some things that have been announced are probably that are still in construction, like Tron, Guardians of the Galaxy. Those will probably still be on the way. But other things that might not have been announced, there could have been a Big Thunder Mountain refurb, giving Disney World the final show scene from Disneyland. That could be gone now. Hatbox Ghost, Haunted Mansion, that could be gone now. There are
a new
so many
Imagination ride gone.
Yeah, absolutely. That could be the same thing, or things like the Festival Center being completely reduced, and we still or the Moana experience completely gutted. And you keep that little bit of Communicore. There are so many questions, so many things that we do not know about. So we will only know the full extent of what we can lose in the coming years.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to assume that anything that's currently in Blue Sky is either shelved indefinitely or complete, or if it's moved on a little bit from Blue Sky, severely cut down. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of repercussions, and I'm hoping that they learned from the period in the early 2000s. And in fact, it makes me wonder if Iger's deliberately staying on in a creative capacity to make sure they don't go down the same lackluster creative path that they went on in the early 2000s.
If I'm going to be cynical about Mr. Iger, I think he's mainly focusing on the movies. I don't think he honestly cares that much about the parks. I think he's mainly focusing on Disney Plus and so forth. So I think, and the parks are considered to be the safe golden goose. So I see investment. I see investment going downhill extremely fast in order to keep the parks looking keeping them black in the books.
Yeah. It's probably right. You're probably right about that.
I'd like to touch on something someone said in chat. Undefined Variable said, you only get paid for scheduled hours. I only got one shift for the next week, so I only get paid for that one shift. And then he goes on to say, full-time employees have a guaranteed number of hours, though, but part-time is not a given. So
that sounds about right. Yeah, that sounds about right. You're guaranteed certain hours. During at least my college program, they pretty much said that in order to keep because they dock your pay a bit if you're staying at Disney housing, they say that you got to have at least 25 hours of work of weekly work, but sometimes people get paid. Some people, I think I got one 13-hour shift. That's just because that was more extended closure and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't sound surprising to me. And yeah, unions pushing qualify for loss of hour when filling for unemployment. So again, it's push and tug in financial instability at this time. So it's a lot of things are going through the motions because we don't know, we don't know if we're in the eye of the storm already, or if we're coming up towards it, or even if we're past it and we're coming to the end of the hurricane, so to speak. So whatever happens, we won't know until next year, really. The grand 50th anniversary of Walt Disney World could just be a complete dud. All we get is Tron, and Newcastle, and Guardians, and that's it. So the 50 new renovations, that could be it. Oh, that reminds me, the lakeside DVC thing building off of old river country, that could be shelved. Which, by the way, slight tangent, but I hate some of the new naming conventions, like Lakeside, a Disney, Reflections, a Disney Lakeside Lodge. And it's the same thing with Pandora, the World of Avatar. I hate the subtitles because they're always trash, just absolute trash. And the new one, Web Slingers, a Spider-Man adventure. It's and this is way past the days of Roy E. Disney, who saying the Tempo Bay Hotel is too complex. Just keep it the Contemporary Resort. We're done past that, and it feels like these names are elevated cringe in a way to make it to make the product sound better than it actually is.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
Sorry, I had to get that out of my system because I hate those names. Though I still think the Pixar Pal Around, whatever it's called, that is still the worst name for an attraction ever built.
I think it's the greatest. It's the best. Pal Around. Well,
I'm trying to think of worse. No, I can't do it.
Pixar Pal. Well, if you guys can think of anything worse, comment down below. Call us in. Leave a voicemail, you guys. Tell us what the worst.
Leave a voicemail. Yeah. Pick up the phone.
Jeremy's getting angry, you guys. You better
security number and give us your credit card information.
Please, I'm
exactly.
Desperate. Don't forget to include the CVV code on the back.
Tony, don't put in your tater tots. Our show is enjoyable, but Tony, never lose your tater tots for them.
Exactly. He also said if you get stock now, this time next year, it will skyrocket. It's all a gamble, though. I've been, guys, Disney stock, honestly. I don't want to give money advice, but
let's not do that. Let's not do that. We don't want to be responsible.
Guys, don't gamble your money with stocks.
Buy now.
You're listening.
Buy as much stock.
You're listening to a film student, a theater performer, and a guy who spilled Snapple. So
exactly. God, that was such a sad moment last episode. It almost touched my surge protector. I was really scared, but. Anyways, continuing on the story, Tokyo Disney Resort also announced that they'd be extending their closure through April 20th. And it was originally supposed to reopen on March 15th, then it was extended to early April, and now it was once again extended through April 20th. So, again, not really much to add on to, I don't think, to that, because it sort of falls under the same category of what we've just been talking about. But yeah, Tokyo closed through April 20th. It's really weird to see just all these Disney parks that were not meant to be closed for this long just empty. Like I mentioned when we were watching that video clip, but again, like we've been saying, it's necessary for it to happen. Do you guys have any final thoughts you'd like to touch on before we continue on?
I don't know, but I feel like I'm going to be redundant for this whole period of time that this is the news cycle for Disney. And
Yeah.
this is,
I mean,
this is the only thing I'm going to be saying.
This is the news cycle for everybody. Yeah, everything.
It's the news cycle for everything.
And after a while, it just gets boring. It's like, oh, coronavirus is still happening.
Yeah.
Oh, look, there's maybe discussion of this. There's maybe, oh, look, this person has coronavirus. And it's like, after a while, it gets boring and you just want to move on to like Animal Crossing or
guys, Animal
Resident
Crossing
Evil 3 remake. I'm waiting for Resident Evil 3 remake. That's coming out this Friday. Oh, man, I can't wait.
I've been getting back into World of Warcraft. I've been playing on the classic. I have a gnome frost mage. He's doing really well, and that's kind of the fantasy life that I'm living during this period of time.
Guys, honestly, like video games, people underestimated just like how much video games people would be playing. I don't know. Animal Crossing has consumed my life, you guys. The new one for the Switch.
That's Animal Crossing.
That's true. I guess that's true. That's true. Great game. Go buy it. Buy a Switch. Support Animal Crossing. But
this is also why T. Will came up with the most amazing kind of like topic that I think will become a weekly thing now, which is this attraction retrospective. I think that's so. I don't like them. Pick a card at people. That's so. That's so. I think that's so important, and to just kind of like sit and talk about not just historically and stuff, but geek out about attraction history and stuff. And as we can't go and experience them in person, we can talk about them.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, before we move into that topic, it's time, you guys, to take a little break and hear a message from the show's sponsors.
Can't wait to hear you talk about Puckermint.
Okay. If you guys are wondering where you can find even more family-friendly live streams just like this one, head on over to theliveplace.com. The Live Place is your headquarters for great family-friendly live streams. They cover anything from Disney to other vacation spots, various variety shows, and have some amazing streamers like Resort TV 1 and myself. Also, be sure to check out puckermint.com, where you can find amazing pins and stickers. Puckermint is based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, just a few hours from where I live. And since I'm a big believer in supporting local artists, we decided to partner up. Be sure to use the coupon code down below when you make your next order. Again, that's puckermint.com and puckermint on Instagram. All right, well, we have returned, everybody. We've returned from the very brief break, and I don't want to spill my pistachio shells all over the floor, so I'm not even going to try and throw them in the trash. But
oh, you will. You're going to.
I hope not. But before we move on, we do have a voicemail that we'd like to get to here today.
Hey!
I believe this is from a Superstar Limo, recurring viewer, member of the Discord as well.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and take a listen here.
Hey, so I'm one of the lucky few to have a VR headset, and I recently played Half-Life Alyx, and while I was playing it, it gave me feelings like I was at a theme park or a themed attraction, such as like, but in a good way, of such like Pirates of the Caribbean, like me being in that sort of place that's just beautifully crafted and everything is meticulously detailed, and it felt like I was physically there, which is something I really haven't gotten from a video game before, and it made me think, like, is virtual reality something that the Disney company should look into or just Imagineers should look into to put their talents into? Because I think it's the closest thing that you can have to being at a experience like you find at Disneyland that you can have at home. And it very much, it makes me hopeful because I'm like, this is something that that should move the medium forward. It feels like a completely new medium because it allows people to experience stuff that they haven't been able to do before. And I'm really hoping to hear your guys' thoughts on how virtual reality and that kind of stuff can be used as a medium to push the same sort of creative processes that Walt Disney Imagineering does at Disneyland and Disney World and at the parks. Thanks, and this is from Superstar Limo / Jared, if you're wondering. Bye.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jared, for that amazing voicemail. I think we've very briefly touched on this in a past episode, and it probably could even turn itself into like a full-blown topic.
It could, yeah.
And I can see Jeremy's answering here. And he's answering.
There are a lot of questions about VR. I mean, it's brand new technology. I mean, it's been around since the 90s at the very latest. So it's strong development over the years, thanks to Oculus and now Valve moving into the space, bringing the prices down and making it more consumer, making it more valuable to the consumer. But when it comes to using them in the parks, brings up many questions, because I think one of the things we value in a theme park, and the thing that would make them worthwhile going to, is an experience that you cannot get at home. So, you can't get a Haunted Mansion experience at home. So you go to Disneyland for that. You go, Expedition Everest, you can't have that here. So you go to Disney World for that. So with these, VR opens up possibilities, but it could also diminish the idea of what it means to be a theme park. And it's like, well, I could just download a version of this back in my house, so that's ultimately the question of that. And I think utilizing VR technology it's been utilized in some parks. Six Flags, SeaWorld have used VR on some of the roller coasters to, I would say, disastrous effects, because it's some of the stuff just doesn't make sense. Like they have a coaster called Kraken. They put VR on it, and it destroyed operations, because you can only load 20 people in 3 hours, and the experience is just very weird and so forth. So there's always those questions. I think playing around with the technology at least and utilizing them in a new perspective and utilizing them in a new format, instead of just, hey, here's VR in Magic Kingdom. I think doing that alone will make it underwhelming and not worth people's time, considering they could just go home and go and buy one off of Amazon. It will be expensive, but that's beside the point. So I think utilizing that technology, similar to actually how Universal is looking to utilize augmented reality to enhance the experience of Super Nintendo World, utilizing that in a Mario Kart attraction to get the kinetic, energetic chaos of the game. So utilizing that technology in a new experience is wonderful. But I think but with any new technology that's especially becoming prevalent to the consumer, is a dangerous tightrope to walk, because you could do something that is becoming more popular and cool and hip, but it could also diminish your immediate value and being like, well, why should I go?
Those are really great points. This brings up a ton of different thoughts that, if this was a main topic, I'm going to try to be brief so we can move on to our next topic. But we should definitely bookmark this for another episode for sure, to have a fuller conversation about this. But basically my beliefs are this. I think Disney has overreacted to, or misreading this. I think that they think that somehow video games are not a threat, but are like some alternative to a theme park experience. And I think that's why they've really, like, in the past decade, have kind of rushed to make these kind of weird, anachronistic interactive experiences throughout the park, to be, because they think video games are competition to theme parks. I don't think that's true. I don't think they are. I think there's an intersectionality. You know, what you were saying, Jared, on the phone is, I felt this way too, and playing video games for the past decade, playing video games like Bioshock Infinite, and the Half-Life series, it like blew my mind when I first played those games a little over a decade ago, because of the world that was being made. And I have noticed in playing video games that there are design principles in terms of just, you know, building the artistry, the art direction and stuff like that. It's very similar to how you build a land in a theme park, specifically the level of detail that goes into a Disney theme park. But I have this hard time believing that it's an alternative. And I remember I was watching, or rather rewatching, the Imagineering story with my family over the holidays. And I remember they had a whole segment about talking about how video games are the future and how those types of experiences are the future for theme parks. And they were saying how, you know, kids can be at home and experience all these different adventures, and we need to somehow try to, you know, bring that on board for theme parks. And I remember my sister turned to me and she said, I know what the difference is. They're completely different mediums. And I was like, I so agree with you. And I think people are aware that they're different mediums. There's an intersectionality between the two in terms of immersion and world building. But I don't think one is necessarily competition for the other, in the same way that there's an intersectionality between early Disneyland and like film sets, film art direction, but it wasn't a competition. You know, there's an inspiration, there's intersectionality, but I don't see it as the direct threat that I think the theme park industry views being able to sit at home. And lastly, there is a great old video film that was shown to cast members or anyone who was working in Disney. I forget what it's called, but and I forget if I even have the link, but it was all about basically explaining and demonstrating the design philosophies of the park back when, you know, they wanted their employees to really understand the Disney theme show and what a theme park is, and the design philosophies behind it. Yeah. The whole introduction to that video, I think it was from the 70s. A whole introduction to that video goes into depth about how ever since the advent of the radio, ever since the advent of the television, social scientists and everyone is saying how this is going to make people want to stay at home and not be active and go out, and how a place like Disneyland and Walt Disney World is actually proof of the opposite, that getting out and experiencing something in the real world in real time, there'll never be an alternative for that. And I think the same is true with video games and in relation to theme parks. I guess my mic is freaking out. Well, the good news is that tomorrow I'm recording my own audio, so you'll be able to hear me plain as day tomorrow.
All right.
I almost kind of wonder if the adversity, or at least their reaction to video games, has something to do with Disney Quest. It probably doesn't, but it would. but it could create this mentality of like, oh, video games. But ultimately, yeah, a lot of art and design does follow the same principles. You see this in architecture, a lot of this in film design, and so forth. And they are working on different mediums. It's just I think it's understanding the exact medium that you're using or taking some unique elements of say VR and video games and seeing the connection between that and a theme park and developing something brand new out of it, instead of just, hey, let's create a ride where you shoot at things and get points. Now those are great, but I think you can do more with it.
We do have one final voicemail that I'd like to get to from Gail. So yeah, let's go ahead and give this a listen here.
Hi, this is Gail. Regarding VR, I personally think Disney would do better to make a whole bunch of 360 videos of their current rides and rebuild old ones and sell that for VR rather than try to put it in the parks. Double up on their money and not ruin the people experience, because even though we hate waiting in lines forever, the way they do that, especially with the queue theming, is part of the experience. And if you were doing it at home, admit it, we'd all skip that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Gale, for that lovely voicemail. Do you guys have any very brief thoughts on that?
It's an interesting concept. As kind of like, I guess you could say, an archival recreation of Disneyland throughout the generations, and like you could sell it as kind of like, I guess you could kind of say, an old school game, PC game where you have the Disneyland Classic Collection, then the Renaissance Collection, the Modern Collection, and so forth. It's an interesting idea. How far you take it is and whether or not it really appeals to people, that's the question. I think it's at least a topic worth exploring on its own, on Disney utilization of VR in a way like that. That could be at least interesting.
Yeah, well, before we let this topic bloat for too long, because we do have a very great other topic that we'd like to get to.
It is pinned. Definitely a fascinating topic.
Yes.
To talk about.
But moving on, we're going to be trying something new this episode. We hope you all enjoy. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is brought to us from Mr. T. Will himself. So we're going to be doing an attraction retrospective, where we discuss a bit of history and impact about a certain attraction and our personal thoughts on it. So, as I spoiled in the beginning, this episode we're going to be discussing everybody's favorite, Space Mountain. Very excited to get into this.
Yay.
So, T-Will, since this is your topic, why don't you go ahead and take the reins here?
Space Mountain has one of the most interesting histories and impacts on the company, in my opinion. So we can stem this back to the Matterhorn bobsleds. Innovative, a lot of fun, and a part of a big expansion and change to Disneyland. Introduced the e-ticket, made Tomorrowland much more substantive than it was back in 1955, and it was the first roller coaster to use tubular steel. So roller coasters like Hulk, Kraken, and all those corkscrew, many steel coasters throughout the years have been all can be traced back to the Matterhorn bobsleds and what was done with Bob Gale and Aero Development. So with a success like that, obviously you want to take on that object. You want to seize the moment, I guess you could say. And so with that, it's a roller coaster idea like that, move it to Tomorrowland. So initially, this was to tackle this idea, Walt took on John Hench for the project, and initially this was going to be Spaceport. This was going to be nothing like Matterhorn. This was going to be 4 tracks. It was going to be a huge building. You go in and out of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane. And John Hench was even pushing to use computer-aided design. This was obviously a little too much for the early 60s. So it was always something kind of moving forward with it. However, it soon found a home, not in Walt's Magic Kingdom, but in Florida's Magic Kingdom. So one common misconception with Space Mountain is that after Walt's death, they completely shelved the project. Just cut it. No, don't talk about it. Focus on opening up Walt Disney World. And then after it opened and seen a big proportion of the attendants being teenagers and young adults, they're like, oh, well, we could put in a new roller coaster maybe. And then they brought back the idea. That's actually not the case, because you can look at early promotional models, promotional brochures. They feature concept art, discuss the mountain to begin with. I can even pull up a passage here that I saved from a brochure in 1970, well before the park opened, that says later in phase one, Disneyland will present the spectacular Space Mountain, 20 stories tall. Inside, guests will pilot space vehicles on a thrilling journey. So from, I would say, 1968, Space Mountain was coming to the Magic Kingdom, though initially it was going to feature the same design that was intended at Disneyland, because initially Disneyland was kind of built like a home plate. So it would have 5 sides to it to fit into the plot of land that was designed for. Well, now with a new plot of land that's much bigger in the Magic Kingdom, they then moved it out, made it circular, created the iconic conical shape, though they did reduce the track size to 2. And with that, and with the increased technology of computer-aided design, we then got the Space Mountain that we know and love, with a little bit of financial help from RCA, who sponsored the attraction in 1975. It opens along with the People Mover in January of 10th or 15th of 1975. Massive hit. So with something like this, and probably they even knew that this was going to be a hit, they then fast-tracked Space Mountain to come to Disneyland. And with Disneyland, with its own constraints, it got a brand new design by Bill Watkins, with a smaller, truncated, yet still fun experience that soon later got cloned over to Tokyo Disneyland and Hong Kong Disneyland. Paris got a completely different version called Space Mountain de la Terre à la Lune, with a launch, and versions, and all the trappings of Jules Verne's great space, steampunk adventure. And the effect of Space Mountain is, I think, undeniable, since it's in 5 of the 6 parks, and I would say even influenced Tron in a lot of ways. This is one of the first, if not the first, fully enclosed roller coaster, and it utilizes its environment to a great effect. And it's just iconic. You cannot a Disney World or a Disneyland without Space Mountain, to me, is like missing the castle. It's like, yeah, you technically don't need it, but it wouldn't be the same without it.
All right,
here we go.
It's a lot of, but I know this. I know, especially the Magic Kingdom version, inside and out. I can even tell you that one of its smaller impacts is that the initial design of the vehicles was brought over to Disneyland's Matterhorn bobsleds with its big refurbishment in the mid 70s. That brought in Harold. They also essentially brought over the same rocket design from Space Mountain over, because they're essentially the same yet tethered.
That's great. And if one of my favorite Historyland episodes that Matt and I have ever done is actually on Space Mountain. So if you want a more entertaining and artistic retelling of the history that T. Will just gave us, go ahead and give it a watch. It's great.
Link down below.
One of my favorites. It's one of my favorites that we've worked on. And there'll be more to come. Teaser.
We promise.
We're working hard ish. So yeah, I Space Mountain is great. I think it's great, and it has influenced. I think there's theme park attractions before Space Mountain and theme park attractions after Space Mountain, just as there's theme park attractions before Pirates of the Caribbean and theme park attractions after Pirates of the Caribbean. And I think it's one of those milestones in Disneyland, Disney park history. I wish I wasn't using my John Hench book as a thing to prop up my laptop, because there's so many quotes that he talks about in terms of the design philosophy of Space Mountain. But Matt, it's actually really good that you used this amazing, incredible concept art. Because T. Will was mentioning early concepts of 4 tracks and it coming outside, you can actually see a little bit of that in that concept art there. I believe that concept art's from 65, although I could just be pulling that out of my, yeah. Where do we go from here? I mean, what do we talk about? Do we
I think we just talk about because even with the clones, each version has its own unique feel to it, and I think discussing each one on its own and then comparing, contrasting, finding our favorite, I think is really because that's really the magic of this attraction. I mean, I absolutely love this attraction. I'm actually wearing a Space Mountain.
So we actually might end up agreeing a lot, because I think, especially when I did a lot of the research for the Space Mountain episode and reading just a lot about John Hench, the genius John Hench, the greatest Imagineer of all time, of just the design philosophy behind it and its effect on people. That he observed after it had opened, it really blew my mind, and I fell in love with it. I had a newfound appreciation for this attraction than just it being a fun roller coaster in the dark. And yeah,
I mean, we could just start with the building. I specifically, I would say the Magic Kingdom version, I think, is still the coolest looking building of all time.
I so agree.
The conical shape with the spires going up. It is so unique and it feels so and it's it's both inviting yet mysterious, because you see this big building and you're like, what the hell is that? Oh, sorry. I'm very sorry for that. Okay. But just
who cares? It's the end of the world.
Let's go. That's the spirit.
But really, when it comes to some it is absolutely amazing, and I think it is a testament to the design philosophy of 70s Tomorrowland, I think, because I still think that the Tomorrowland Magic Kingdom 70s Tomorrowland is still the coolest one, and it just might be me because I love that kind of conical white geometric kind of idea. It still feels cool and futuristic to me, and I think Space Mountain is emblematic of that. And stepping into and the fact that is carried through even Paris, it takes a different tone with it, but it still keeps the same general philosophy, or at least general idea of Space Mountain. I think it shows how strong of an icon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Tim Delaney is responsible for the Paris Space Mountain. Really, I mean, it's amazing how he's able to implement just that iconic structure where you can look at that shape as a piece of architecture and go, Space Mountain. I mean, anyone who is even a casual fan of the Disney parks can look at that structure and go, just that shape, and recognize that it's Space Mountain. And he's able to infuse it with the essence of Jules Verne, and it's just it was a wonderful nod and also just kind of retake on the attraction. Anyway, I agree that structure. I mean, and it's not really just 70s. I mean, it goes back before then. I mean, it's something John Hench was thinking up for a long time, and he had that structure in mind. I think it was one of the first things that he kind of when it was kind of solidifying. And of course, what helped was Walt Disney dipping in. There's something that in the Imagineering story, Raleigh Crump used to say Walt Disney would just kind of like give you exactly just little things, exactly what you needed to hear, just very simple. He was referring to the clock for Small World, and of course, iconic piece of architecture. I think one of the greatest art installations of all time is that facade in Small World, but that's another attraction retrospective. And the same is true with Space Mountain, because I don't think we would have gotten this iconic, experimental, inventive piece of architecture, revolutionary piece of architecture, if Walt hadn't said, just, probably searching for the right words to describe what the kind of attraction he was thinking of. But I forget the exact words. I'd have to go back to the Historyland script to find it. But he said something about, like, after Matterhorn came out, he said, why can't we have something like a space
Oh,
mountain
yeah, why can't we have a
ride?
space mountain? I remember that. I made an infographic for that.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it was just Walt kind of probably just like describing the kind of exactly. Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
and it's just, and it shows again a small impact of the ride, because you think of the mountain rides. I mean, Matterhorn is the first one, but when you think, but to me, I always think of names that have the name mountain in them, and that's the three: Space, Big Thunder, and Splash. They all have the mountain in there, and it's kind of that signifier of an e-ticket that demands your attention and will give you a wonderful experience.
Absolutely, and beautifully put. I love demands your attention because, and I hate using this word. Walt, I love him to death, but I mean, is this really the word that we use for this? Weenie. I hate that word so much. But it is the design. It is the official design. There's no other. It's not. It's like I can only use that word because landmark isn't quite right, and like icon isn't quite right. Like weenie is the. It's like, and to explain what that is, for people, it's it's what different than like a landmark is. Like you look at this, the Empire State Building, and you go, wow, there it is, and that's it. With with a weenie, and John Hench uses this example a lot because I think it also is just one of the most genius ones there is. Splash Mountain. You can see it in the distance, and it's this inviting structure, and there's a level of mystery to it, and you also see motion. You see logs coming down a flume, and you can look at it from across Frontierland. I think Tower of Terror is a brilliant one too. And you go, "What's that over there? I want to go there." And you make your way over there, and there's those levels of immersion, where then you're up close to it, and then all of a sudden, it's a landmark that literally draws you in to it and makes you curious about it and makes you make the decision to go to there and go on that attraction. And I think Space Mountain is great example of that too, especially in Florida. Just the sheer size of that structure is just, it's so great, and
the fullness of it, because this is a comparison. I really do not like the way that I would say cluttered Disneyland Space Mountain by adding onto, like, the rock, the amphitheater kind of at the bottom, and the Starcade. That's all nice, and it makes it a complex. But what it does is that it kind of minimizes the effect of the mountain itself, and the fact that Florida went above and beyond to where you look at it from the contemporary, and it still follows through with its design. Seeing kind of the growing spires go out into the whole thing, it feels like a complete piece. Whereas at Disneyland, specifically, I'm talking Disneyland. Because it's kind of being cluttered by everything, it kind of feels like this little complex, and then a little hat of an iconic building. Funny enough, Tokyo actually mitigates this because it's just the mountain. It's not as fully complete, but it gives off its own vibe, and it's still extremely strong to it.
Yeah, it works just slightly better, but I will say it worked so much better in Disneyland with the speed ramp. Because you were like, it was like you were going up to launch,
And I can tell you from going on Tokyo's Space Mountain, they still have the speed ramp, and it's still kind of a cool feeling of going on there. Though it is weird to know that a building that sends you careening across the galaxy in the dark is sponsored by Coca-Cola.
We could talk about the history of the weirdness of sponsorships throughout Disney park history.
I mean, also, like, the Space Mountain was sponsored by a radio company, so it's like all this stuff.
My favorite of all time is Indiana Jones sponsored by FedEx.
No, it was AT&T. It was AT&T. Space Mountain was sponsored. It was AT&T was sponsored by. Space Mountain was sponsored by FedEx.
FedEx. Okay, so I knew there was a FedEx in there somewhere.
Yeah, but it was Space Mountain. It was Space Mountain in the '90s with its
Got it. Okay.
as part of its redesign. And this is actually something that was taken a bit away from Florida's version that still bugs me to this day, and that's the Tomorrowland Light and Power Company, because it's a fine design. Fits in with the Art Deco, Buck Rogers design of the new Tomorrowland of the '90s in Magic Kingdom. However, sitting it right next to this '70s geodesic John Hench design, it does clash badly with it, even with the repaints and so forth. And it makes me wonder, how bad is the bottleneck going to be when Tron opens if they don't take it out?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. Well, I'm curious about what your thoughts are. The design contradiction, and actually, and maybe it isn't a contradiction of having two roller coasters right next to each other in Tomorrowland.
It's an interesting concept. I guess one idea is that two e-tickets together is a very odd idea, and it does kind of cause one area to corral too much instead of spreading it out. At the same time, it is one of those. Even with the amount of land Magic Kingdom has, it is still landlocked to some extent. So finding areas to put together a new attraction is going to be harder and harder. So you will end up with a compromise, I would say. I don't think it's as bad, but I can see why it can be considered a contradiction, a dent in kind of the idea, especially with how bold Tron demands itself to be. That could be another thing, and that's where the idea of why not have it fully replace the Tomorrowland Speedway at least has more of an argument, because it kind of fits in a space that demands its presence yet doesn't demand it yet doesn't take away too much from Space Mountain. It's a complicated question because it's logistics and so forth. I mean, you can ultimately start from the beginning and say, well, don't put it in Magic Kingdom because it doesn't need it. But after that decision, but that decision was made, so it's just a matter of finding the compromise to give Tron its breathing room, but not take too much away from Space Mountain. When it continuing on from this. The different experiences, because with the exception of, I think each version has its own experience. I mean, starting from the queue with Disneyland, let's not include the ramps, let's not include the outdoor section because that wasn't there at the beginning. So let's start with going inside the actual building. With that, and this is I think where Disney World has it really strong, starting with the satellite building, going in with the music, and then the Star Tunnel going underneath the railroad. It just completely immerses you into a place of space and exploration, and the music, which was not there from the beginning. It was added in the mid '80s with "We've Come So Far," but I think it's just so perfect, and I don't want it to ever go away. I think it is emblematic of Space Mountain in its sense of adventure and its sense of
mystery.
Space and a bit of mystery as well. And you notice from the beginning, from the satellite until you get to kind of, I guess, the big corral with the load sections, the song is always still there, even in its more ambient version, with the just kind of these twinkling sounds when you're seeing all those dioramas. Again, those '70s dioramas of seeing this turning space station and seeing the vehicles of people flying by. All that is lovely.
I love it.
Yeah, I love all that stuff.
I love it. And yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
I think we're going to end up agreeing. No, I think we're going to end up agreeing. I think the original Space Mountain is the one and only. You don't feel that way on any other version of Space Mountain. It's just such an amazing, full, unique, thrilling, fun experience. And the thrill, by the way, is in the theme. It's in the design principles. It's in the design ideas. It's not necessarily in how fast it goes or anything like that. It's just purely, it's the genius of John Hench. And one thing I love about it is it really is about the unknown, the anticipation of the unknown. And this is where we learn a lot about the example of overcoming something. And it relates back to John Hench's overall philosophy of theme park design, specifically a Magic Kingdom park or Disneyland, of the architecture of reassurance, that you overcome something and you experience something that you, emotions, feelings, human things that you would never experience elsewhere. That they're so you're put into extraordinary circumstances and you overcome them, and your body goes through it. Even if it's a crafted experience. And it's just, and this goes back to why video games can never replace a theme park experience, because your physical self is going through this. That's not to say you don't feel stress and immersed, and you don't, I feel things when I play video games all the time, but it's not the same thing. And it's just overall, it's a lesson in design, in theme park design, I think. And Disneyland's doesn't really do the same thing for me. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of like Space Mountain Light. In my mind, a little bit. It doesn't offer that full overarching experience with all those little extra details that the Florida one has.
I actually kind of agree, because ultimately, what the I guess the general zeitgeist is that Space Mountain Florida is absolute trash, and they should just, and the good experience is over at Disneyland, because they got the smooth track and they got the music, and and everything else doesn't matter. And I think, and while I do think that Space Mountain at Florida does need a lot of love and care, a retracking I think is necessary. And I think maybe updating the vehicles to make them a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more roomy, without changing the design of the course at all. And and actually you don't even need music, because Tokyo doesn't have music, but it still works on its own, and that has its own unique kind of dark kind of feel to it, actually, that I like more than Disneyland. So with Magic Kingdom Space Mountain, I think is really a complete full and my favorite attraction. I think Space Mountain always has that sense of wonder and adventure in all versions, but of the three that I've really experienced, I was going to experience 4 Paris, but when I went there in 2009, it broke down when we were in the tunnel. We were in the cannon. So it's like, oh, about to start, and then there we go. But to me, Florida's Magic Kingdom, even with its outdated aspects, I think still has a strong. I think is still much stronger. The queue is much better. It has better music, in my opinion. And I think the experience is just a much more complete, full, and fun experience. All around. Even with changes like removing the speed ramp for the end exit. That's a sad thing, but you still keep the idea of venturing through and seeing like a new world of possibilities. Still within that land. And I think Space Mountain is something that I don't think should ever go. Hopefully it never goes. And it's something that it's an experience that I think will last. I think will last lifetime. And with
absolutely.
And I think any change that it does go through, I think should stay to the core of the ride, which is that sense of wonder, exploration, and mystery a bit, and thrill. I mean, it is a thrilling ride, not in the literal sense. I mean, you're not pulling four G's of force
in the thematic sense.
Yes, exactly. And it does it and each one does it in its own unique way. For me, my personal preference is for the Magic.
Me too.
we're talking on Matterhorn Matt's opinion. What's Matt's opinion on all this stuff?
Well, I mean,
Yes.
you guys already sort of took everything, so I will say.
I mean, you have your own personal opinion.
No, yeah, I mean, I love Space Mountain. It's always like a must-do, whenever I visit Disneyland. I got to experience, I think only like once, the Florida version. Only once. The first time I went, it was closed, but the second time around, I got to ride it.
It was probably for the 09 refurb.
I think
that changed up some things. They
probably
when they added video games actually to kind of pass the time, which are now gone.
Mhm.
So that's a day gone by.
Yeah, well, I guess I should say that I do prefer the Disneyland version just because it's the one I grew up with, and just because.
Hey, it's the one I grew up with too.
That's true. That's true. I can learn to love the other one, I guess. But
That's
yeah,
fine.
the track. I don't know. The track, like you guys said, the track is smoother. The music is better. But yeah, I do just like exactly what you guys said. But yeah, I do have an appreciation for the Magic Kingdom one for all the things that it has that the Disneyland version doesn't have. Like you guys were talking about the extended queue. Big fan of that. Although I do love Disneyland's queue, not the outside part, but I've grown up with it. I guess I just
honestly the queue, even inside the queue, it's kind of boring to me because I think it's in an effect of trying to. I think it's a bit too sterile. It doesn't have its own character to it.
Yeah,
because,
yeah.
And the only cool room I think is the end room, and that's just because it has the big spaceship.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, I do.
I
love Space Mountain.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, of course. I personally am, I want to hear everyone's thoughts on this. I am pro no music on Space Mountain.
Oh.
No music.
Wow.
I think it's a better experience.
Huh.
I think it adds more to the ideas of the ride, of the unknown and the mystery of space travel. And I just think it's a better experience, and that's why I love Florida's, even though they have that weird kind of ambient music now since 09. But I still think, and I love the music from 2005 on for Disneyland's, but I don't know, there's something about the silence of space that makes it a little more intriguing, a little more mysterious, a little more dangerous, and I love that about Florida's. And so I am, and that might be controversial. I don't know, but I'm
think
so
that
pro
is
no
controversial.
music on
I've never
Space
heard
Mountain.
anyone say that before.
I'm
Well,
personally.
you've heard it here.
Well, now you have, but I'm personally, after experiencing Tokyo's, I can kind of do, I can do with or without, because each,
I'm sorry.
it doesn't need it, but if done right, it can be it could be, if not, if it doesn't have it, then then fine. If it has it, then I think it has to be strong, and that's where something like I think that's where you have to, if you're gonna have a music and experience like Space Mountain, maybe that's where something like De la Terre à la Lune comes in, because that was designed from the ground up with music in mind. I mean, it was
I am pro music on that one. For the first version.
I think that was the first I think that was the first roller coaster to have onboard music. So that was a big innovation.
Because Disneyland didn't get it till 97.
Yeah, and that's with the and that was with the original version by the king of the creator of surf music, Dick Dale.
Yeah, Dick Dale,
who everybody knows. So it's but even then, no offense to Dick Dale. I mean, rest his soul. I mean, but I don't really like it. It's a bit too rocky for Space Mountain.
It is. It's a little bit anachronistic, and it becomes a little bit cheeky. And it actually, I think, makes it a campy experience, which oftentimes the attraction is accused of being in the first place, and I don't agree with that. And I think that's because of that makes it that way. The 2005 track, I think, still makes it a little campy. But that's why I don't like music. I think music, you have to be very specific. Sure. I think music obviously is a key component in all other types of attractions, especially when you have great composers who understand the form that they're writing for. But I think, not every attraction needs to have a score. And I think I wouldn't even want music on Thunder Mountain. I think there are some attractions that I think it's specifically a lot of roller coasters I don't think need it, because you're kind of in this. I think the silence just builds the tension more than the music telling you to feel tense.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, even something like Expedition Everest has a little blip, but it's only there for the
It's
big lift.
atmospheric. It's atmospheric, and it's something that you kind of pass by.
Yeah, and even then, it doesn't need it, because the mystery of the dangerous mountain works on its own, and I do see that with Space Mountain. I think that's where the idea of maybe for Florida Space Mountain specifically, maybe taking the cue music of We've Come So Far and kind of amplifying that and having that be kind of like that grim grinning ghost of Space Mountain, essentially having it be the emblematic piece, as it kind of signifies that, sense of wonder, mystery, and adventure, but still kind of scores it throughout it, and it's constant.
And then they do the vocal version, which we've lost over the years. We've come so far, but have so very far to go. I think that's cheesy too.
Dreams become reality.
Yes.
But I think, but even then, the exit version that we had, that was just that was just the single horn. I mean, that just bringing that back for the exit as you're walking past. Oh my God, that'd be so amazing. So I think
Well, before we continue this discussion, we do have a voicemail here that is about the soundtrack. So let's go ahead and give this voicemail here. Listen.
What's up, boys? It's Brett. I'm gonna have to say I disagree. I'm gonna have to go with the Dick Dale soundtrack. That's the most epic Space Mountain soundtrack. Shoot!
It's Brett, you guys. Big fan of Brett.
I mean, it's totally classic.
It's all down to preference. If I guess you could call it off-board music of Magic Kingdoms is kind of techno and kind of cheesy, but it kind of works with the initial, but it works on its own with that kind of 09 iteration of Space Mountain, which is mostly the same, just little things here and there. But ultimately, I think if you're going to have music, you really have to kind of think hard and do something very strong with it, like a space, like a De la Terre à la Lune version, or and I'll even give props to the Disneyland version, the Michael Giacchino version, because I think it still has that kind of it kind of has a more actiony response to it, which works on its own. But after experiencing Tokyo's, I would have to say it's not necessary, not bad, not unnecessary, but not important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know what I prefer than the onboard audio for the 2005 Space Mountain is actually his exit music. I think is so much better than the onboard audio. It still uses the same musical motifs, but I just find it much more adventurous and epic and majestic.
I mean, that's essentially that's essentially the lift hill sequence. Kind of the beginning where that's the build up a bit, at least parts of it. And I think that was brought over. I think that was brought over in 06 to Magic Kingdoms, which makes no sense because it's just a completely different vibe. And that was brought in for the exit music. It just doesn't work, and that's where somebody you get people saying like bring the Disneyland soundtrack over to Magic Kingdom. I just don't think it works. They're completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it matches some of the beats, they're just completely different vibes, their own different experiences. And I think allowing them to have their own individual experience, I think is still extremely important. And that's where, viewing a Disneyland version versus the Tokyo version, track is the same. Basic, some of the queue stuff is the same. Speed ramp, both had the speed ramp, now only one, but but they still have their own unique feel and vibe to them that I think work for each of their Tomorrowlands and Space Mountains in their respective resort, in their respective park. So you have to be very careful with music and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I love the current Disneyland soundtrack. I prefer it, I guess you would say, over the Magic Kingdom one. But again, that's just because that's the one I've known, the one I've grown up with. Love it. But yeah, do you guys have any other thoughts on the great attraction Space Mountain?
I think it's even though it's mentioned a lot, I think it's an attraction that actually goes kind of underappreciated because of
Sure.
because we I think because of how we progressed so far, we've come so far. We've we've moved on to stuff like Steel Vengeance, this hybrid coaster of wood
Yeah.
of steel wooden that flips you in corkscrews, goes 70 miles per hour with 3.5 Gs and all
Right.
this stuff.
Yeah.
We've moved on to crazier and more inventive roller coasters and more extreme theming of like Galaxy's Edge or even Tower of Terror, stuff. We've moved on from that we then look back at Space Mountain and kind of say that's cheap, cheesy
Mhm.
70s stuff that we
Yeah,
can
I
move
guess
on
so.
past. We can move on past with like Tron. I mean, like that's going to be the new thing. But I think really, I really don't think that's the case with this attraction. This is an attraction.
I agree.
That is so emblematic of Disney. You can find many enclosed roller coasters, throughout the world, and even some that are very space themed, like Europa Park had a indoor roller coaster that was space themed. But really, Space Mountain is emblematic. I just thought of it. Black Hole at Alton Towers was kind of its own knockoff of the idea, but it's still. The Space Mountain is essential Disney. It's kind of like you can have haunted houses, you can have, long boat rides and so forth. Yet, Haunted Mansion and Pirates, It's a Small World, Living with the Land, all these are still emblematic of, and I think they are still pinnacles of WED Imagineering and showing.
Yes.
And I think there are things that will always, and I think should always stay relevant and present for the future, even if it means doing some things like a little bit of retracking, maybe doing some cleanup here and there. The only thing I hope we don't do is bring back the old bronze paint from like.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
I remember it well. Yeah.
I don't remember it because I've mostly been to Magic Kingdom, but just that idea of like the bronze paint on Space Mountain. You go inside and it's still 70s. I was like, but it's an attraction that I think should always last forever and should always be, because even if we do achieve Elon Musk's dream of space travel for the common man, it still captures that sense of wonder and imagination, and it's something that will always be in our collective hearts, essentially, of space, of mystery, and of wonder.
Echo everything
Absolutely.
Table just said for me.
It's absolutely true, and also I love what you said, that this attraction and many other attractions, tight genres of attractions, if you will, they're emblematic of that period of just WED Imagineering. These specific artists, discovering and utilizing their own artistic voices. I know so many people say Disneyland's not a museum. I know what they mean. They mean it's not like a place where things are preserved. It's not. It's not a. It's not like that. But it is a museum. It's a modern art museum. It's a 20th century modern art museum. And what's on display are these great works of art from some of the best 20th century artists. And it goes back to something Raleigh Crump said in that amazing LA Times article that I always refer back to because it was such a great interview a couple years ago, in which he said that basically all of these attractions, they're art displays of these particular, each attraction is the work of one of the Imagineers, one of the artists. Small World, even though Raleigh Crump did a lot of work on it and Blaine Gibson did a lot of work on it, it's Mary Blair's piece. That is, you go there and to be like, that's a Mary Blair, if you're if you're interested in the Disney park history, like we are, but so many people are. It's a growing thing because of platforms like this. And I feel the same way. You go into Tomorrowland and Magic Kingdom in Florida, and you look at that structure and you're like, that's a John Hench. And you go on it and you experience it. It is a museum. It is like going to the MoMA. It is the same kind of experience for me, of going like, wow, I'm experiencing this work of art by this person. It just adds another layer, especially if you care about the history of the parks. And so it is a museum. It's a living, breathing, modern art museum and what's on display is some of the greatest examples of 20th century kinetic, immersive, ahead of its time art. In fact, that in general has influenced the contemporary art scene more than any other pieces of art ever. More and more contemporary art is immersive displays, like Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
I think it also it's stuff like Space Mountain, and I would include in that Epcot Center and Animal Kingdom. I think it speaks to a single creative vision, even if you have this strong collaboration with people. Because like something like Expedition Everest took a lot of people together, but it was still one clear vision spearheaded by Joe Rohde, and that ultimately made it a wonderful, clear experience. And it is something that has been over the years, even with great additions like Flight of Passage and I assume Rise of the Resistance. While they are great experience, there is kind of a loss a bit of the clear vision, of a clear creative mindset.
Absolutely.
In the pursuit of immersive IP land.
Mm-hmm. I so agree, and I think the problem with that, because I actually look at Flight of Passage as a Joe Rohde attraction, but I understand what you're saying. What's missing is the individual artistic voice. Like you can look at, you can go through Small World and go, that's Mary Blair. That is her voice. Like when you study pieces of art, you go, that's very clearly a Van Gogh. It's the same thing. You go through Pirates of the Caribbean and you're like, this layout, this background, that's Claude Coates, man. I mean, those figures, Blaine Gibson sculpted those. It's very clear. And Mark Davis designed them. You can tell the style. And the fundamental problem that I have with just IP franchise lands is that I have no doubt there are incredible, talented artists working at Imagineering who don't get to bring out, discover, and use their personal artistic voice. They have to adhere to the art director of the most recent Star Wars film, or the art director of the Guardians of the Galaxy films, or the art director of Avatar, which great art direction for those movies, but what's missing are individual artistic stamps in unique experiences. And I agree with you. That's completely lost. And it is exactly what makes Disney theme parks what they are.
This is essentially kind of what I think is kind of at the clear IP originality debate. It's not, because I don't think any of us here are against intellectual properties being used in the parks. They have been since the dawn of Disneyland. But I think it's kind of the loss of, I think it's the loss of the kind of the creative vision. So like we're saying with, let's keep Flight of Passage as an example. It's Joe Rohde's interpretation of Avatar, not Joe Rohde's vision of something like that. So Joe Rohde creating an attraction like Flight of Passage is well within his bounds. It's something that he can easily do, because he's that eccentric and creative. But he's confined to what James Cameron created, and what James Cameron created worked for his movie. But when it comes to expanding that into a brand new land, I think is the pure question, is the pure problem with something like this. And Scott Talbridge worked on great stuff like The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man over at and even stuff like Wizarding World of Harry Potter, but at Universal. But with Potter and Star Wars, which he later worked on, he's still within a pure box. He cannot deviate really outside of it and get very creative and create a new voice within that. So like, so something like Rise of the Resistance is a wonderful experience, but it's confined to the sequel trilogy. You know, the new, not new, but Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey, great attraction, but it's confined to the movies with Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson and all of them. So you have, so I think that's really the core of what's missing. It's not it's not the utilization of IPs, it's the confinement of creative vision.
Absolutely.
By IP only lands. And that's kind of what I was getting at last week, in which my big question was, when does, you know, what is this going to mean? Because, you know, Fantasyland, Tomorrowland, they each have their own, you know, they can get dated, but they have the flexibility of being a general idea, an idea of fantasy, an idea of tomorrow, an idea of a forgotten past with Frontierland. And what do you get to that with, and when you have just, this is the land of Star Wars. Well, Star Wars can only go so far. What do you do with that? If, you know, what we do with Marvel Land once its time is gone from the sun, you know, that's why, you know, and even Bugs Land had that kind of issue where, you know, one movie, you know, one fine movie, you know, and no doubt people loved, you know, Bugs Land and so forth. But because it was confined to one Pixar movie back in 1998, it was inflexible. So ultimately they had to go nuclear on it and level it out for a brand new land that if I were to predict, they're going to level and restart again once Marvel becomes not as popular. And Matthew Ackerman said, you know, he's going to love Epic Universe. That's the question I have for Epic Universe, and I don't doubt that Epic Universe is going to be a wonderful time. But it is those, and it has some things like like the classic Universal monsters and Nintendo that I think have that flexibility of working on their own. But something like Fantastic Beasts or How to Train Your Dragon, those I think will be more severely confined, and they won't have that. And again experience that. I guess we could call it. I guess we could call it kind of IP confinement is, I guess, one way to put it. IP, you know, let's coin the term. You know,
a new term coined on this podcast. We have
the second time.
And we have IP confinement, which is the most. I've been searching for a way to articulate it in a concise manner, and just creative confinement, IP confinement is the perfect way to do it. Thank you for that. Wonderful.
All right. Well, I think really great discussion we've had, and I'm very excited to see future installments of this segment. What was it? What were we calling it? Imagineer.
Me too. I'm excited.
Or Attraction Retrospective. So
Retrospective.
Yeah. So tune in next week, you guys, for the I don't know what attraction we should do next week. We'll figure it out. But anyways, I think that is a great place to leave this episode. Thank you all for coming out to today's episode. As always, links to everything will be down in the description below. And do you guys have any final thoughts you'd like to say to everybody before we sign off?
Wash your hands. Just do it. My hands are like beaten up because of how much of it. It's the best thing you can do. If you can get virus on the hands, if you wash them with soap and water for 20 seconds, the virus will be gone from your hands. So just do that, please.
Mr. T. Will.
I have one little tune to kind of sing for this. Just a little thing.
Okay, all right.
There's a great big beautiful tomorrow shining at the end of every. There's a great big beautiful tomorrow, and tomorrow's just a dream. Things might look bad, but we'll get through this, and ultimately, tomorrow will be better.
Wise words. Thank you, Mr. T. Will. Well, I have to pee very badly. I've drank so much Snapple within this almost 2-hour episode. But again, thank you to everybody for coming out. And as always, have a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.